Hey everybody, and welcome to Every Book All at Once week 11? Yeah, 11 I think, right? So we are starting off the week. Last week was a very atypical week. It was not a great reading week. My mind was definitely on much bigger priorities. We will see what ends up happening with this week, where my mind is going to be throughout this week, and what goal I'm going to be getting. The benchmark is moving again. When the benchmark, I am going to actually increase it. So I think I'm putting the benchmark at 24%, I think. Yeah, 24%. And that should mean that I need to make progress in 2 books. Because of the goal of last week, if you've seen, of getting my 3 lowest books 10% further. I actually have nothing under 20%, so normally the benchmark was going to move to 16%, but I'm like, yeah, nothing is there. There's no book that is at that percentage. So the best thing to do is move it up to 24 is what I just said, right? So I have 1 book at 21% and 1 book at 23%, I think, and so those 2 have to get to 24 in order for me to reach the benchmark. So that is not very challenging, but I chose to have it like that. I could have moved it up to 26, but that would have increased the amount of books I needed to make progress in, and I think, considering last week's progress, that we shall still be really kind to myself in terms of how challenging I want to make my reading life, because yeah, I also want to allow myself space for feeling whichever feelings might occur throughout the week. But I'm going to start a screen recording because I'm also going to go for a reading goal and an activity goal. Other weeks I have had punishments if I didn't reach the goal. I have yet to complete the goal, but I'm filming this on Sunday, so I personally also don't know yet whether I managed or not, but I think I probably did. But the activity goal I definitely didn't, but because of what happened last week, I decided not to even give you guys the opportunity to give me a punishment, and not to be that strict on myself and be like, you know what, things happen, and this is definitely a reason for me to be like, if I didn't get that goal, then I didn't get that goal. Okay, so I have normally kept, I have to check, no, I have to put it back in the activity goal, because I didn't do the activity of last week, but I do definitely still want to have it in there because it was suggested by one of you guys. So let's start with the reading goal first. There are still quite a lot of options on here, and I will repeat myself for the 20,000th time. I want to finish goal. There are 3 books that are close to finished. Okay, fine. So, lowest 2 books every day. The universe just wants me to keep on reading all of these books all the time and not have the time to focus on stuff. So the 2 books that are the lowest in terms of progress every single day, I need to read in them. So every day I'll see at which 2 books are at the bottom of the barrel, basically, and I'll read, most realistically speaking, a chapter in each of them, and then the next day I'll check again. It might be the same 2 books, but maybe the chapter I read in them the day before means that a new book is now at the bottom of the barrel, and so in the next 2 books I'll read a chapter. So that has to happen every day for this week. So, not ideal, because I definitely just wanted something like finish 2 books, would have been lovely, but at least with this we can kind of work, with this we can still, do the bare minimum in these 2 books and dedicate the rest of the reading time to other stuff. And I say now that I'm going to read like a chapter in them every day, but I don't even have to. It just says lowest 2 books every day. So for example, there are some books here with pretty long chapters that do have like paragraph breaks, so I might just read a few pages in those, for example, if they were ever to come up, which I don't think so, because that book is pretty high in the ranking. But so yeah, that is the idea behind this goal. Activity goal, let's spin for it. I guess that makes sense. The universe really wants me to do this, so you'll be happy to see this, Natalie. So I didn't do it last week, but it is back as the activity goal for this week, so I will try to make this happen this week. But so yeah, I do definitely think that I can be lucky, I can be happy with these goals, because in principle the goals are not challenging. So in principle I can just read little bits in these 2 books, and because they're going to be the 2 lowest ones, that should also mean that the benchmark is automatically going to be filled. And so I can just get away with bare minimum reading if I feel like I need to get away with bare minimum reading. And I do think that it does allow for quite some progress in other stuff as well, aside from that. So in principle it's fine. It just annoys me that I'm just gonna never get one of these finished goals. It's just the universe playing a prank with me at this point in time, right? But so yeah, let's finish last week's goal and then I can get to focusing on this one.
In all of us, in our hearts, there's love and light that we must realize. We need to feel, we need to use this warmth that could make bright our lives. In all of us, in our hearts, there's love and light that we must realize. We need to feel, we need to use this.
Alright, so this is week 11's little tab on my Excel file, and as you can see, for the first day I've highlighted the books that I need to read today. So we are ignoring these last 3 here because I haven't finished rereading the first books in those series, but these ones are the ones that I'm the least far along in. And yeah, we'll see. I'm on sprints now. G is doing sprints, and I might just dedicate a sprint to each of these, but the first sprint is super short, so I don't know whether that means that I'll get much done in the gods below as a consequence of that, because it's gonna be a 20-minute sprint and I'm already first updating you guys about this. But so yeah, that's what we're reading right now. You will see here at the top that I've also finished the book, but I'll update you guys about that later.
Woensdag. En dan is iedereen die met hem gaat.
Hey everybody, so I have finished, as I indicated yesterday, first book for the month, finally. So I finished The Five by Hallie Rubenholt, yeah. So this is a non-fiction about the 5 women who were killed by Jack the Ripper. And when I tell you that it's like the tagline is the untold lives of the women killed by Jack the Ripper, Jack the Ripper's name is barely mentioned like 5 times or so in the book, you know, like it delivers on what it tells you guys. It is about the women. It's not about Jack the Ripper himself. But I thought that it was like a super fascinating book. Like, these women didn't necessarily all live flashy lives, so there definitely is a lot more sort of like interesting things to talk about when it comes to their lives than you would maybe think. Maybe you would think that, you know, they were just like regular women, grow up in London in certain circumstances and stayed in those circumstances their whole life, but that is definitely not the case. You see with many of these women how they've kind of like had
ups and downs in their lives, the way that everybody does nowadays, of course, as well, and how there were times in which they were actually, some of them at least, were actually pretty well off or in a pretty stable environment, but then for all of them, there are circumstances that led them to be in Whitechapel, which is a very poor part of London at that point in time. And I really enjoyed this book, not just about because it teaches us something about these women and their lives and puts the focus back on them, but also because it teaches you a lot about lives of ordinary people at that point in time. When we are reading stuff that takes place in like Victorian England, you're basically like reading about aristocracy and stuff like that. And yes, you get some information about lives of ordinary people in, for example, like Dickens novels and stuff like that. But I still feel like this gave me so much better ideas about like what's to imagine the life path of somebody at that point in time to be like. And what I also enjoyed, because I didn't know this before, is how it like it redeems some of the image that these women have, and it humanizes these women as well, regardless of whether they were indeed prostitutes, as what is like the common understanding. What's commonly said is that Jack the Ripper was a murderer of prostitutes, and this book very much questions this legacy, very much questions whether these women were in fact prostitutes, pointing out that there's only like one for which we are certain that is how she identified. So I like that it's questions that, and it shows that in that societies and that times idea about women and their place and what they should be doing, a lot of these women were kind of lumped in with prostitutes because of the fact that they had left their husbands, for example. They were living alone. They were living a life unlike what society thought of as the life of a proper woman, and as a consequence they would be seen as prostitutes, for example. But also, just regardless of that, it gives such a human face to these women who, for many of us, otherwise are only seen as the victims of Jack the Ripper. And it puts names to these women who are very much whose names are very much not part of common legacy, whereas Jack the Ripper's name is a name that definitely has passed through the ages. So I really enjoyed it a whole lot. I thought it was really interesting to listen to, and I learned a ton of it. Unfortunately, with these type of books, for me, it is always like in one ear, out the other, and I've already forgotten so much about these women and about the circumstances of their lives. So I could definitely see myself rereading it at one point and hopefully retaining a little bit more at that point as well. But so yeah, I have just returned from a book event. So it was an event for a nonfiction book about the Tasmanian tiger that is coming out in Dutch. So I went to that event, which it was really nice because it was like a little bit of a theatrical staging to it, and we're using like multimedia to kind of like break the monotony of like somebody being there and talking about it. So there was really sort of like staging to it, where she would move from one place to another, the lighting would change, they had props here or there, they would use different cameras, had video footage and stuff like that to break up the whole thing. Sometimes it was filmed, sometimes she was standing fully in the dark, sometimes she was in the dark and had like a flashlight. So it was very like cinematographic to some extent, and interesting as well, talking about the Tasmanian tiger and sort of like the search for whether there are still any living Tasmanian tigers around at this point in time, and also a discussion around the idea of bringing back Tasmanian tigers through sort of like de-extinction technology, and sort of a lot of discussion, of course, about environmentalism and the impact of man on the natural world and the natural resources, and in that discussion, of course, about the extinction soft technology, kind of also talking about like, okay, the resources that we are putting into de-extinction, and whether that research might not better go to avoiding further climate disaster and further extinction. And what I also thought was interesting was that she, in her introduction and in her closing word, was kind of talking about how there's a lot of emotion regarding like the Tasmanian tiger. Many people are fascinated by the idea of this creature and by like the 37 seconds or something of footage that we have remaining of this animal, and kind of putting it out there, like, is this sort of like a grief that we feel, like, why do we feel this level of grief for an animal that has passed away 100 years ago? Is this sort of like guilt over having let it happen? Or is this potential already a sense of loss for what we are about to lose, as we are about to lose so many more species as well? But so yeah, I thought it was really fascinating. I definitely think I'll borrow the book from the library, even though it was like a gorgeous edition. I was just like, no, let's not buy it. Let's not add to this project. It was also it was a gorgeous edition, but I will just like borrow it from the library at one point in time, I guess. But so tonight, so yesterday I did read a little bit in Between Dragons and Their Wrath, and I read a little bit in The Gods Below. So The Gods Below is still it's still the like least progressed book on my TBR at this point in time. So I'll read a little bit in The Gods Below now, and then the second lowest book is Mistress of Lies, in which I will also read a little bit today in order to make sure that I progress with that. This is also the official release date of Bloodguard by C.C. Robson, which I am already quite a bit in because I received this like 2 weeks ago, I think, at this point in time. And so, but the good news about it being released now is that I can now listen to the audiobook, and so the audiobook is now accompanying me on my journeys to work. So this is a fantasy romance gladiator type of setting, let's say. And yeah, yesterday I also read a little bit in The Final Strive, Kushiel's Mercy, yeah, and that's it. So, but yeah, let's get to reading, and let me cuddle Faith a little bit because I think she wants a little bit of my attention. So today I had to read these two books, which is Herald and Fathom Folk. And that actually means that we end up with the exact same two last books as we start with. So Between Dragons and Their Wrath and The Gods Below. Now, it's definitely gonna keep on doing that to some extent, because if you see here, I have a lot of books at this point in time, which are all around that same percentage. So tomorrow I'll read in these two books, which will probably mean that they jump over these two books. And then we'll just keep on doing that slightly. And there's actually a big possibility that by the end of this week, everything is going to be at 30%, which will also be interesting. But yeah, you can see I am like I should be reading 118 pages per day. I have not really been making that, but I definitely was close enough here. Not too shabby, but today we still need to read a little bit. But I am really, really eager to start and read my daily section of Kushiel's Mercy, which I'm really enjoying. So it is before 10 o'clock tonight, which is the earliest that I'm getting to Kushiel's Mercy in this entire week. So let's go. I'm ready to make a little bit more progress in Kushiel's Mercy tonight. All right, it's Thursday evening. I've just gotten back from Spanish class. It is 10:15, and I have to start my progress in the two books that I'm the least far along in. Of course, the positive thing here is that it's just progress. It doesn't have to be a ton of progress, which I'm gonna take quite literally because, you know, I cannot do a whole ton in any case. So I'll see if I can read like a chapter in each one of these. So it'll be Between Dragons and Their Wrath and The Gods Below. But I might not even get to a chapter in each one of these. It might just have to be like a part of a chapter in both of these. Because I'm also, you know, like this is like a super long day this Thursday, because basically I have my old regular work day, then go to physical therapy, then go to Spanish class for 3.5 hours. So yay! But next week is going to be a holiday week, so next week there is no Spanish class. So at least next week I have another week off from Spanish class. Though I enjoy it, don't get me wrong. And I actually enjoy it more this year than I did last year because I like the style of the teacher a little bit more. But yeah, it's still a super long day. So let's get this reading over and done with. I'm actually also reading Bloodguard. I've mentioned it before, I think, this week. So Bloodguard is my audiobook for the commute to and from work. And I'm enjoying it, but I don't know how I feel about, like, the romance is very, like, I think it's set up as if it were like a hate to love thing because of like the description of the at the back and like this initial concept of the fact that he's like a gladiator being forced to kind of battle to the death, and then she's a princess of the realm who kind of like buys him as a sponsorship sort of deal, and he very much resents them for putting him in this position. But like there is not that much enemies section to it. It disappears almost entirely from the very get-go, it feels like. And it is just so many green flags in this relationship. And I don't know yet whether I enjoy it or not. Like, I do enjoy having a little bit more of a wholesome relationship and a little bit more of a sort of like a less of this sort of like, oh yeah, I don't really care for her at all, I'm not attracted to her, whereas you can't stop thinking about her or whatever sort of deal that you a lot of times get in these types of slow burn books. So this is definitely not slow burn. It's like it's instantly on. And I don't know, I'll have to see how the book develops, because to some extent I'm like, it's just, I'm not used to it. So I'm like, is there going to be like a huge sort of like miscommunication that leads to a falling out, or is it really going to be like wholesome couple vibes, but the world trying to keep them apart, which it seems to be like at this point in time. But yeah, I don't know what's gonna come next. So I don't know yet whether I enjoy this dynamic, but it's very different from the typical sort of like fantasy romance that I've read. This relationship reminds me of a relationship in another series, but there it's sort of like third book in, not even fourth book in or something, you get this level of the love between the two. And because this is kind of established so early on in the book, I'm not as invested, or I'm not as along for the ride as I was with that, because there I could see it develop, whereas here it kind of feels like, oh yeah, we're instantly into each other and instantly like ready to die for the other, you know. So yeah, be that as it may, let me go and read now. Hello, I'm now a real booktuber, a real vlogger, because I'm now finally vlogging from the car for once. But so yeah, it is Saturday. I'm going for the ingredients for this week's activity goal. I didn't find the spelt yeast, so but I couldn't replace it potentially. But I do have a garden center near me where I can also still go for that. I mean, the grocery store would also have it, but I just don't want to go to the grocery store right now. So I'll go to the garden center a little bit closer to me and see if they have it. But so yeah, I just went here because they had like a Christmas section that last time I was here wasn't open yet, so I went here now. And I was also hoping to find a pumpkin already for pumpkin carving for Halloween. But once again, they didn't have one, so I'm hoping that the other garden center has them. But last year they also didn't have the like decent sized pumpkins, so maybe I'll just won't find it at all in any case. But so yeah, I got a few things, including food for Fate for like the next month and a half or something like that, so that I'll already have food for her for when I will be on holiday. And then yesterday I mainly read in Your Blood, My Blood, so I read the 2 obligation chapters, so Fathom Folk and Herald were now at the bottom. So I read those, and then I switched over to Your Blood, My Blood and read about like 80 pages in that. I do feel like I'm losing losing some of my interest with that a little bit. It is definitely sort of like the spooky Halloween vibes, which is why I chose it for this weekend, because this is Camp Enchanted Halloween edition. And so I wanted to read something like in the atmosphere of Halloween. And so this is definitely sort of like spooky stuff. It has to do with like a monster in a woods. It has like potential undead people. It has like mimics, stuff like that. So it has quite a lot of creepier stuff. So it definitely fits the mood. But I don't know, the slow burn of this, and yeah, it's starting to be too slow for me, I guess. And I'm kind of like, come on, guys, put some action in there. Like, let's get things moving. But so yeah. I'm not going to need to apologize to Natalie in advance, but I cannot follow a recipe to save my life, it seems like. So, I mean, I do it quite regularly for HelloFresh, but apparently a baking recipe, which you should be following much more strictly, is something else. Because, yeah, I was preparing the dough for this challenge. Then I realized I don't have enough flour, because when I went to look for the spelt flour yesterday, I didn't actually find any, or I found some, but it was like 2.5 kilo, and I was like, yeah, I only need like half a kilo. I don't know when I'll use any other spelt flour, so I don't want to buy a 2.5 kilo bag, and so I just left it like that. And part of me was like, maybe I should make sure I get some other wheat flour. But I didn't, and then it turned out that I don't even have 500 grams of wheat flour. So I was like, okay, like let me, like I had like 450 or something. So let me replenish with like 50 grams of self-rising flour, and then like just half the recipe, which I did more or less until the point in which I had to add the melted butter, and I added the entirety of melted butter rather than half of the melted butter. And then the dough, of course, is too wet, so I had to add flour to it. So we are improvising already, and you're not supposed to do that at all when you're baking. And then I was like, okay, sure. So now it rises for 1 hour, and then I checked the time. I was like, wait, how did it all of a sudden become 10:30? Meaning that at 11:30 the dough will be risen, and then I can shape it. But then normally it would go into the oven for an hour, but I need to be at my parents' place at 12. So I'm basically, I've done some researching into this, but not a ton, I will admit. So this is going to be also very improvised. But I think I will let it rise for the 1 hour now. Then I'll shape it, and then I'll put it in the fridge until I'm back from my parents' place, and then I'll bake it when I get back. So if this doesn't plan out, there are 20,000 reasons why, and all of them can be brought back to me not being able to plan. But so, yesterday what did I still do? So I did read the 2 books that I needed to for yesterday's sort of like, like the reading challenge. Yesterday, I think that was Harold and Mistress of Lies. So I read the chapters that I needed in those. I'm just checking my spreadsheet for a second. Yes, that is correct. And now the remaining things, I'm wondering why is my, okay, that's why. Now the books for today that I need to read are A Dark and Drowning Tide, which I think I'll listen to the audiobook for that while I'm on my way to my parents, and Immortal Longings. So those are the 2 I need to make progress in. And actually at this point in time, there are 3 books that are under 30%. So those are 2 of them. And then The Gods Below is also under 30%. So I think I might actually try and make it so that I get all 3 of those to 30% as well today. And then I do want to finish Your Blood, My Bones today as well. So I am 49 pages away from finishing that at this point in time, so that should be more than doable. And that will have been a 2nd book finished for the month of October, though I do hope, like I do plan to focus on finishing books before Thursday. I don't know what the reading goal is going to be for next week, whether that will allow this or not, but it is definitely my intention, and so let's hope for a goal that's going to make that possible, because there are a few books that are like just over 100, under 100, or like 160-ish away from being finished. And so if I can focus on some of those early next week, then I can get a few more done before the end of the month and go into November with less books in this challenge, which is which would be a good thing. In any case, I would love before sort of like the break of my holidays to have been able to reduce the amount of books that I'm currently reading by quite some extent, so that when I'm back, I'll go into December with less hefty amount of books to finish, because that'll be the final month of this challenge. But so yeah, now I'm just going to go edit a video, I think, and then I'll, shape the breads and hopefully end up with a nice bread later today that I can then eat with the pumpkin soup that I made with HelloFresh yesterday.
All of us, in our hearts, there's love and light that we must realize. We need to feel, we need to use this warmth that could make bright our lives.
So I have managed to complete the goal for this week. So I have read in the 2 lowest books every day for this week. I did not do what I just said in the previous clip, so I did not end up reading In the Gods Below to get that one also to 30%. So that is actually currently the only book that is under 30%. But I was just like, you know what? Let's call it quits for the rest of the week. We've made that goal, and I just spent some more time watching the Simone Biles documentary as well, to kind of spend some time on something other than reading as well. It kind of means that the weekly page count is not where it is supposed to be, but it's fine. It's really, really close to the weekly goal, so I'll take that for the time being. As I've previously indicated, the weekly goal doesn't take into account the time in which I'm on holiday, and so I am expecting to make up for some of the losses throughout that week, throughout that period, and we'll see. Maybe next week will be like exceptionally good or anything like that, but in any case, I've managed the activity goal. I've tried my bread, I enjoy it, and I think that tomorrow I'll just take my sandwiches to work, my own homemade bread sandwiches. So thank you, Natalie, for the recommendation for this goal, because while I have played with the idea of making my own bread for years, I've never really put it high on my sort of list of things to do. And so if it weren't for the fact that you had recommended this as an activity goal, it would have just remained one of those things that I always say, like, oh, I might want to one day try, and now at least I've tried. Will I ever do this again? Who knows, but at least I've done it. And even though I didn't really stick with what the description said it did, I am happy and proud of myself for recognizing the correct elasticity that the dough needs to have, and being like, no, I need to add some flour here, or otherwise this is just not going to turn into breads. But so yeah, with that, I am ending this edition of Every Book All at Once, and yeah, I will insert the Excel sheet for this week, so that you guys can see like what I read throughout the week and what I had to read. So the ones that are like colored in greens, those are the ones that for the weekly goal I had to make progress in. And so I did actually, let me talk about that as well. I did finish a book this weekend. So for Camp Enchanted, the Halloween edition, I did decide to focus on Your Blood, My Bones throughout this week, and not this week, this weekend, and it didn't turn out to be a success. I originally was invested in this book, and I did like the atmosphere and the fact that this is very much suited to the season, but unfortunately I also like grew to be really like sick and tired of it by the end, and I feel like midway through I already felt like, okay, I'm not really invested enough to like for what I would want. Like my level of investment isn't where I would want it to be halfway through a book like this, and like things just felt too drawn out, and it felt a little bit too sort of like dramatic, tragic, teen drama, telenovela, and that's probably gives the wrong impression. It definitely felt very tragic, It's definitely sort of like a tragic love story, and like there's a lot of resentment between characters and stuff like that, but while you're also like, yeah, sure, but you actually do just love this person, so just get over your stupid feelings and admit this. So I was just growing a little bit impatient with it, and then towards the ending, definitely there were like a lot of times in which I sort of felt like we're just like extending the hurt. We're just like drawing it out now, and I'm not entirely always sure like what we're doing here, what we're trying to do, what our reasoning is for certain events, and that also just made it like more of a struggle for me. So for those final 100 pages were a little bit more of a struggle for me to get through, because I definitely started to feel like, you know, I just want to see whether things end up turning all right or not, and like how things are gonna end, but I'm not really all that invested in that anymore. So yeah, I don't know, I enjoyed The Whispering Dark by Kelly Andrew, but I feel like it might just be a expectation thing. Like I went into The Whispering Dark with 0 expectations, kind of went into it with bad expectations because I knew it was like considered a YA, and then it surprised me and I enjoyed it more than I expected. And the opposite has happened here. Because I enjoyed The Whispering Dark more than expected, I went into Your Blood, My Bones hopeful, and it ended up being more of that more teenagey, angsty than I would have liked to see it, you know. So unfortunately, not a hit, but it means one less book that I'm currently reading, so that is also a win. But so yeah, with that I am ending this week's edition of Every Book All at Once, and next week we are just continuing to read all of the same books except for one, so that is what you can look forward to now, and I'm actually going to go into the first clip for next week's vlog so that I will find out what the goal is for next week. But so yeah, thank you guys for following along to my journey. Definitely let me know your thoughts on this week's goal and this week's books, and see you guys for the next one. Bye!